Hello everyone and welcome. We have an incredibly important topic today. We are discussing actualizing your higher self, the 3 steps to actualizing your higher self, making the unconscious conscious. Now, actualizing your higher self is the pinnacle, you could say, of personal evolution. It is the goal that we should all be striving for if we want to evolve personally. But the big question is, well, first, what is your higher self? And how do you go about actualizing your higher self? So in this video, we're going to look at the 3 steps to actualizing your higher self. And before we jump into what those 3 steps are, they're extremely important. But before we do that, let's figure out a little bit about what your higher self is. Because a lot of people throw around this word higher self, but not very many people actually understand what it truly means, what it actually represents. So we're going to be looking at the idea of the higher self and how to actualize it. And this is going to involve some of the ideas of Carl Jung and depth psychology, but we are able to go further than that and beyond that because we understand the nature of reality, that this existence is a mind, and that we are individual minds. And since we know the structure of the mind and how existence works, we are able to go much further and beyond the concepts, the foundational concepts in Jungian psychology, depth psychology, and things like that, even though those things are extremely important. So let's take a look at first, what is your higher self? Before we can jump into the 3 steps to actualizing your higher self, what is your higher self? So to be able to get a better understanding of this, we are going to take a look at the symbol of the triskele. A lot of people ask me what this means. There's a lot of different interpretations of what this could mean. We have a couple different interpretations for it, but one of them is a powerful symbol of you as a mind, the higher self, and your unconscious. So each one of us is an individual mind, an eternal individual mind called a monad. Now this symbol back here represents the totality of you as a mind. So, and each one of these sections, each one of these portions is going to represent a certain structure within your mind. We're going to look at what each one of those means in just a minute. But it's important to realize that when you look at it as a whole, this represents you as a mind. So your higher self is you in your completeness, in your totality. You can see that there are different sections, and each section is going to represent a piece of you, a portion of you, an element of you. But you, in your wholeness and your totality, in your fullness, in your completeness, that is what your higher self is. It is you in your totality. It is the whole. So, real quick, we're going to take a look at the different structures here. So if the entire symbol, the symbol in its entirety, represents your higher self, each one of these sections in here is going to represent an archetype of your unconscious. So what is an archetype? An archetype is basically a structure of your mind that influences and guides your life. And they are so different and operate almost independently and uniquely that it's almost like you have a multiplicity of different personalities or a multiplicity of different selves within you, within your mind, within your unconscious. If you've ever heard someone say, let's say someone gets really, really angry and they're behaving out of character, right? You say, oh, that person wasn't being themselves. Well, what can happen, what that is that person is being possessed by an archetype. which is a structure of the unconscious. It's taking a hold of them and they're behaving out of character. They're not being themselves, so to speak. That's because they're being taken over and controlled by an unconscious archetype. Carl Jung said that the unconscious will guide and direct your life, and you will call it fate. Meaning that the unconscious will guide and direct your actions and can take over you and your life and your choices if you don't make them conscious. That's why making the unconscious conscious is incredibly important, so that you are control consciously of your life, your actions, your choices, and your actualization, rather than it being sort of guided by an unconscious force that you don't have a conscious control over. So if this symbol as a whole represents your higher self, what do these three sections represent? Well, these three sections represent your shadow self, your mirror self, and your power self. A lot of people have heard of the shadow self. That's just one element, though. There's your shadow self, your mirror self, and your power self. What does the center dot represent? The center dot represents your ego. And the ego is the center of your field of consciousness. So we have the symbol as your higher self. The totality of all these structures is your higher self. Each section, we have the shadow self, the mirror self, and the power self. And then the point in the center, we have the ego. Now, what's very important to understand, and this is extremely misunderstood in New Age teachings, Eastern teachings, mystical teachings, things like this, is that they look at the ego as a bad thing, as a negative thing. And that is folly. That's the worst thing that you can possibly do. The ego is not a bad thing that you need to destroy. The ego is the center of your field of consciousness. It is a tool, a very powerful tool that is the center of your field of consciousness that allows you to make conscious choices. Now, the ego is not who you are. You don't want to identify with the ego, but you don't want to destroy it either. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. Those who say that you should destroy the ego are making a terrible, terrible mistake. That is the opposite of evolution. That's devolution. You are devolving if you try to destroy the ego. You will no longer be actualizing yourself. You will be setting yourself back. So the ego is not something that should be destroyed. So let's get that out there right away. However, you don't want to identify with it either, because it's not who you truly are. Look at this entire symbol. This entire symbol, in its totality, is who and what you truly are. The ego is just the center point. So you don't want to identify with this. You don't want to say, that's me, because that's not you. All of this is you. However, you don't want to destroy it either, because it's a very important piece of you. It's a very important tool. And the ego is the selector function that we will be using to make the unconscious conscious, to be able to actualize ourselves. It is incredibly important. The development of the ego and self-consciousness is what took us from the consciousness of animals, which is actually unconsciousness, and took us to having a human consciousness. The ego is a very important evolutionary development that allows us to actualize ourselves. And we're going to look at how that is. But once again, just to reiterate, all right, because this is so important, so many people get this wrong. You do not want to destroy the ego. The ego is very important. However, you also do not want to identify with the ego. You need to recognize and understand what it is, and that it is a powerful and important tool. So, we are now understanding that all of you, in your totality, that is you and as your higher self, right? But the vast majority of it, all these huge chunks here, your shadow self, your mirror self, your power self, this is all unconscious. So in order to actualize your higher self, what you have to do is make the unconscious conscious. And we're going to look at the 3 steps of how to do that in a moment. But this is the critical point to understand. Your higher self is all of this, but it's not actualized right now. It becomes actualized when you make the unconscious conscious. So these huge chunks here, these huge structures, are what we need to become conscious of and integrate it into our consciousness so that we may become whole. And that is how we actualize our higher self. That is how we bring it from potentiality into actuality. And the ego is the center of our field of consciousness. And this is the selector function, so to speak. It will allow us to select for important data. So, we're going to do a quick overview of what these different structures mean, the shadow self, the mirror self, and the power self. And if you haven't yet seen my video series called Inner Star Actualization, it gets into this in a lot more detail than what we're going to be describing here. So I'll put a link to that. I'll pin it in the comments of this video once this video is over. But make sure you check that out to know a lot more about all these different structures. But we're going to give a brief overview. So what is your shadow self? Your shadow self are the parts of you that society says is wrong and unacceptable. And so you repressed them into your unconscious. So this can contain both negative and positive traits, because it's everything that society and culture said about you and said is wrong. Now, they may be right about some of these things. Let's say you are, very angry and aggressive to detriment. Well, society and culture is going to say, hey, that's wrong. You can't be acting like that if you want to, live in a society. So that gets repressed into your shadow self. You deny that part of you and say, oh, that's not me. And then you sort of push it away into your shadow. But it can also contain very positive things, because guess what? This society and this culture loves to condemn individuality and loves to condemn expression. So let's say that you love to express yourself by wearing, wild makeup looks or something like that. But let's say, all your friends as you grew up made fun of you. Well, you would repress that and deny it, and then that would get relegated to your shadow self. Like, look at me, I wear makeup and things like this, right? People get on my ass about this all the time and troll me and things like that. If I had let this get me down and said, you know what, and then stopped wearing makeup and repressed that into my shadow, that would become shadow content. I would say, that's not me, that's not who I am, but it really was, but it's getting repressed into your shadow. So once again, the shadow is all the parts of you that society has deemed as unacceptable. And it can contain wild creativity, wild individuality, artistic expression, things like that. It can also contain negative traits like anger and aggression and addiction and things like this. But the important part to remember is that you have repressed this into your unconscious. And so it's still a part of you. It's still who you are. You have just denied it and said, nope, this is not who I am. And so that's your shadow self. What is your mirror self? The mirror self is all the opposite traits of your ego self. So let's say that you are an extremely masculine and artistic person, right? Let's say that your ego self is extremely masculine and very artistic. Well, that means that your mirror self is the opposite of that. Your mirror self would be extremely feminine and very logical and intellectual and structured. So, and this can, this applies to everything. The opposite would be true. Let's say that you were extremely feminine and artistic. Then your mirror self would be very masculine and intellectual and rational. And it doesn't have to be so extreme either. It is just however your ego self is, whatever traits that it has, your mirror self is the opposite of those. So you have them. They are but they're locked away within your unconscious. And integrating your mirror self is important because you want to be whole and complete and unified, right? You want to have control over all your mental faculties. You want to be artistic and you want to be intellectual. You want to combine it all together. Now your power self is extremely powerful. Yeah, hence power self. But it's a little bit difficult to explain outright. A better way to understand it is think about people that you admire. Think about characters that maybe in movies that you admire and that you think are amazing. That is your power self. Your power self are the traits that you admire in others because you're projecting, or that you can understand your power self by understanding the traits that you sort of worship. You shouldn't worship, but sort of worship in others. That you admire in movie characters. But this is actually a part of you. And the reason why you admire them so much is because your unconscious is saying, hey, that's me, and I wish that were part of my consciousness. So instead, but the folly that people make is that they will worship these traits in others instead of actualizing them in themselves, right? Your power self is very, very, very powerful. If you actualize your power self, you are starting to become very close to actualizing your higher self because they are very closely related. So these are the different structures. We've gone over them extremely quickly and extremely simplistically. If you want to know more about them, I'm going to link in the pinned comments of this video, and it's going to be called Inner Star Actualization. So we have a very broad overview of the unconscious, the different structures, and the fact that we want to make the unconscious conscious in order to actualize our higher self. We want to make what is potential, what is hidden, come out and come forward. And we are going to look at the 3 steps in how to do that, because now that we know a little bit about what we're trying to do, we need to know how to do that. And we're going to do that, but first I want to say hi to you guys because yes, this is a live video, a live chat, so let me jump into the comments here and say hello to some of you guys. And guys, if you are on Facebook, go over to YouTube right now. This is where I'm going to be interacting in the comments. The link to the YouTube is in the caption in the description of this video. So click the link in the description of this video, go to YouTube, make sure you subscribe, and that's where I'll be interacting in the comments. So hello everyone, so good to see you. I'm glad to see that so many of you are enjoying the live stream so far. Hello, let's see who is here. Hello, Jordan, Kim, Eterna, Audra, Jay Jones, Elise, Jordy, Arjun, Rowan, Dahlia, so many of you here today. A big shout out to all of you who have donated so far as well. I can't tell you how much the donations help, and when you donate, I will do my best to answer the question that you put up with the donation. So Jennifer Fitzgerald donated, said, love you in your message. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Let's see if I missed anyone else. Monique Slater, thank you for the donation. And Crystal Domont, thank you for the donation. I think that I got everyone so far. So let's see, I want to answer a question here. Oh, thank you so much, Liz and William Hanna for the donation. William says, highly resonant, love the knowledge breakdown. Okay, now here's a good question that, let's see, who donated and asked a question? Monique Slater said, thoughts on ego death during drug taking. So I'm assuming you're meaning psychedelic trips. So yes, here's the thing. When you are taking, psychedelics or whatnot, you do have what is called an ego death. And this, I really don't like this term because it's highly misunderstood. So what is basically happening when you take psychedelics or when you enter void states or what have you? The goal here and what is happening isn't that we're sort of destroying the ego. What we're doing is temporarily bypassing the ego. We're temporarily bypassing left hemispheric consciousness and entering right hemispheric unconsciousness. We are bypassing the linear, structured, sequential processing and entering into the all holistic sort of source processing of the right hemisphere of the brain associated with the unconscious. So basically what happens is, yes, you can, through these different techniques, temporarily bypass ego consciousness to enter into the rich world of the unconscious and then take that information back with you into consciousness. So when that happens, the goal, it's not like the goal is you're trying to destroy consciousness. It's that you're temporarily bypassing it to gather up this information in the unconscious and to bring it back with you. Now think about when you're dreaming. When you're dreaming, you are within the world of the unconscious. But how much more powerful is lucid dreaming? And lucid dreaming is when you're basically sort of turning the ego on while you're in the realm of the unconscious. And isn't that a lot more powerful, right? When you're just having a regular dream, yes, you're within the realm of the unconscious and you can learn a lot from that. But when you sort of turn the ego on, you will become lucid. And now you have a lot more control, right? So remember that the ego is a tool. And yes, you can temporarily bypass it, and that can be powerful. It can be interesting. But it's important to get away from this mindset that the ego is the enemy and must be destroyed. No. That is one of the biggest mistakes that, New Agers and Eastern traditions and mystical traditions teach. All right, let me take a look at some of the comments here and jump in. Once again, guys, if you are on Facebook, get over to YouTube right now. That's where I'm interacting with comments. The link is in the description of the Facebook video. Click it, click open app, and click subscribe. Guys, if you aren't subscribed, get subscribed. Your sugar packet said I lucid dream all the time. Excellent. Excellent. Your sugar packet says sometimes I sit back and let it play out, other times I control my entire dream. Well, that's very good. Both have their pros and cons. If you just sit back and let it play out, you're letting your unconscious direct you, and it may show you things that you are unaware of. If you direct it yourself, you can also do things that you normally wouldn't be able to. You can question dream characters. You can explore areas you normally wouldn't go. So both have their pros and cons. You can either sort of sit back and see what the unconscious brings to your attention and tells you, or you can take a more proactive role, a more integrated role, a role of a conscious agent in where you're consciously exploring. But again, both have their pros and cons. Jumping into the comments here again, and once again, guys, so many questions go by. For those of you who donate, thank you so much, and I will do my best to answer your question. You can write a question along with those. Thank you so much for the donation, Demon Hunter. Let me get that right, Demon Hunter. And thank you for the donation, Aquarian Essence. Aquarian Essence says, delicious as always. Love that you're educating the masses on this higher mind to higher self for this new wave of existence. Absolutely, it's incredibly important. It's a very, very important topic. We must actualize our higher selves. So many people aren't even aware that they have a higher self. You see, they've identified with their ego. You don't want to identify with your ego, but you don't want to destroy it either. You want to understand that you have a higher self. And it's even worse than that. Most people in this world haven't even identified with their ego. They've identified with their persona. So, your ego self, your ego consciousness is sort of who you are when you're at home alone and no one's looking. Your persona is a fake you that you have created, a mask to get along in society. So your persona is what activates when someone says, oh, hi, how are you? And you go, oh, I'm doing just great, with a big smile on your face, when, you know, inside you actually want to die. That's your persona. Your ego consciousness knows what's going on, but your persona activates. And so many in this world have identified with their persona. They're not only are they not aware of their higher self, and not only have they not identified with their ego self, but they've identified with their persona. They have become the fake mask. And then this happy, smiling, fake sort of mannequin, oh, it's very, very creepy. And that is extremely dangerous because they are repressing so much of who they truly are. And when you repress and deny certain aspects of yourself, it will come out and take control of your life. Have you ever gotten a super hateful comment, like a terribly hateful comment on social media, and then clicked on their profile, and they were, you know, it's this like big, happy, smiling face. They probably even have a picture of, you know, them with their kids, and it says positive vibes only, and like, you know, smiles and stars. They've created this fake persona, but they are vile inside because they haven't done any shadow work. And so it pops out and comes out like a monster at any chance it gets. And that's why they leave these terribly, terribly hateful comments. Let's see. Thank you for the donation, Rock Till I Drop and Alex Dessen. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. So let me jump, and we have a lot more to go. I haven't even begun to talk about the 3 steps to actualizing your higher self. At this point, we've just discussed the structures, but we need to talk about the 3 steps because, you know, how do you do it? Alex Jane says shadow work is everything. Shadow work is incredibly important. I wouldn't say it's everything, because take a look here. It's just a section. We have the shadow self, the mirror self, and the power self. So shadow work is incredibly important. And shadow self, shadow work, it's kind of like where you first start as a beginner in learning to recognize unconscious structures and how to integrate it into your consciousness. It's really, Carl Jung said that the shadow self, that shadow work was the apprentice piece. You know, it's where you start. People don't even get past shadow work to understand that there's also mirror work and power work. So shadow work, this is kind of, you know, it's incredibly important. This is sort of where you start out. Mirror work, your mirror self, this is the most difficult archetype to integrate. It is the most difficult. Why is it the most difficult? Because it's the opposite. Shadow self is everything you've repressed. Mirror self is the opposite. And guess what? The reason why this is so hard is because if say your ego self is incredibly masculine, that means your mirror self is very feminine. If your ego self is very intellectual, that means your mirror self is very artistic. And guess what? Those who are, you know, super masculine never want to admit that they have a feminine side. And those who are super intellectual generally don't like dabbling in the arts. And those who are super artistic generally don't like things like logic, reason, and mathematics. So this is why the mirror self is the most difficult to integrate, but it's also the most important. It's also the most important. The power self is the most dangerous to integrate. And if we have enough time, I'm going to go over why the power self is the most dangerous archetype to integrate. But first, let me jump into these comments here. Alex Dessen says, I'm learning language rapidly since my anima. I'm not sure what you mean, my friend. I believe there's a language barrier. But I'm glad that you are doing so. And thank you for the donation, my friend. Let's see. Kenneth, thank you for the donation. Kenneth says, we love you. Thank you for what you do. That means a lot, my friend. I really appreciate that. And thank you for the donation, Wayne. Wayne says, keep up the work. I will indeed. I gotta tell you, I love going live with you guys, and I'm committed to bringing you higher quality live streams because it's seriously, I look forward to it every week. I go live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific time, and this is when I get to hang out with you guys, and community is so important in this toxic world, and this community is so important. So I love hanging out with you guys. Alex Jane says, I'm so ready to move on to the mirror work. Mirror work is so important. It's the most important. Now, one thing to understand is that, it's going to take some time to be able to even understand what these different structures are. But once you do understand what they are, their integration is going to be, a lifelong process. So it's not like first you integrate your shadow, then you integrate your mirror, then you integrate your power self. It's not like this sort of, step-by-step thing. You're going to do pieces and portions of all of them, right? It's going to be, some of this, some of that, some of this. You're going to be doing pieces and portions of all of them. However, we're going to talk about why you want to at least start integrating your mirror self before integrating your vast portions of your power self, because power self is very, very dangerous, but very, very powerful, very powerful. So if we have time, we're going to get into that, but I still want to talk about the 3 steps to integrating your higher self. Well, thank you so much for the donation, Kim. Yes, Kim is asking about left-handed versus right-handedness. Left-handed versus right-handedness will usually dictate what hemisphere of the brain is most dominant. Very perceptive here. Okay. So your sugar packet says, is that why everyone thinks they have twin flames? Because they haven't done their mirror work. This is a topic I want to do an entire video about because it's complex, but you've hit on something very profound. So when you haven't properly integrated these different aspects of who you are, you will project them. So, and projection can be very dangerous. Shadow projection, let's say that you have homosexual tendencies, but you repress that into your shadow. Well, what shadow projection can happen is where you will then hate all homosexuals because you have projected that quality of yourself onto them, and then you want to sort of eliminate them because it causes a cognitive disturbance within you, because it unconsciously is reminding you of something that you have repressed. So mirror projection happens when you project your own desire for unity and wholeness in your opposite traits onto another. So instead of looking for completeness and wholeness in yourself, you can project it and look to trying to find the fulfillment of that in another, in a partner. And this can have 2 very bad consequences. The first consequence is that you're looking for in another instead of yourself, which can put a lot of pressure on the other person. And for those who have a very sort of conservative mindset, this can also make you sort of hate the other and the opposite. Because again, those who are sort of very conservative, and let's say they're very masculine, they'll hate the fact that they have a feminine side and deny it. And when they project, this can be what makes them hate women, because they're projecting this sort of contempt for their own feminine side. But anyway, back to the twin flame question. So many people are getting caught up in this twin flame thing, and I have to do a whole video on it because it's very complicated and there's a lot of different elements to it. But you're very, very intuitive in saying that it has something to do with improper mirror work. So that's something I want to talk about in a future video. So great observation, great intuition. So let me jump into the comments here. Thank you so much for your donation, Alex Dessen and Sandra. Sandra says, love this, giving me a different perspective of ego. I'm very happy to hear that. And thank you for the donation, Rachel Dahlia. Rachel Dahlia wants to know if I've heard of Eckhart Tolle. Yes, I have. He has some interesting observations, but I certainly wouldn't agree with a lot of things that this individual says. There's a lot of people out there that get some things right but get other things wrong. I don't want to say too much on this individual. That's, again, maybe I'll save that for another live stream or a video of itself, so I can really flesh out, you know, the sort of pros and cons of different people and ideologies that they've put out. Thank you for the donation, Horkpaw. Horkpaw says, I have a very strong personality and ego that gets taken the wrong way most of the time. Is there any advice on dealing with this? And thank you for the donation, attitude movement. I appreciate it. So Horkpaw says, I have a very strong personality and ego that gets taken the wrong way. Is there any advice on dealing with this? Well, I mean, this is a very, I would have to know more about your individual situation. You know, what exactly is getting taken the wrong way? You know, remember that the important thing to remember about the ego is do not, I'm going to do that clapping thing. Insert clapping emojis here. Do not identify with the ego. All right? You don't want to destroy the ego, but do not identify with the ego. The ego is not who you are. It is a tool, so you can shape it and mold it. So if there's parts of your ego that are causing you difficulty, guess what? You don't have to be like, well, that's who I am. No. Change it. You can alter it. You can. So your ego is the center of your field of consciousness, and it needs to be evolving. It needs to be changing. It needs to be growing. So you can, if part of it's causing you an issue, you know, you can change it. Let's say your ego personality is, you know, very aggressive and angry. Well, don't just be like, well, that's who I am, and I'm not going to change it. If it's causing you problems, you can change it. Now, I'm not saying that aggression is always a bad thing. You can be angry at the fact that this world sucks. So I'm not one of those people who are just like, oh, anger is bad all the time. Anger needs to be managed properly. It's perfectly fine to be angry at the state of the world, for example. Let's see, jumping in here. Phil Hall says, what about our emotional primal side of our brain? What is, and thank you for the donation, Phil. So basically, you can simplistically understand the brain as being composed of 3 major parts. This is called the triune brain. And there's the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and the neocortex. And this is a very simplistic model. It's not 100% accurate. But basically, you know, you have the part of your brain that deals with basic instincts. Then you have a part of your brain that deals with emotions. And then you have the part of your brain that is about logic and reason. In humans, we have developed this part of the brain, the neocortex, and it should be able to govern the other parts. The neocortex must govern the mammalian brain and the reptilian brain that exist within us. We must govern and guide our emotions and our instincts. We don't want to let these things control us. The neocortex is the most recent development in evolution. So we want that to be our guiding function. And once again, just so that I'm clear here, guys, things like the triune brain, they are simplistic models to help us get a better understanding. They're not 100% accurate, but they're very helpful. Same thing with like left hemisphere and right hemisphere. It's a simplistic model. You know, to say, for example, that the left hemisphere is all about language and the right hemisphere is all about, let's say, you know, emotion, or something like that. It's not 100% accurate. For example, both sides of the brain have to do with language. Left hemisphere has to do with syntax. Right hemisphere has to do with understanding meaning and sort of things like emotional content of sentences. But anyway, these things are very, very helpful to give us a simplistic guide, you know, because not all of us have the time to, you know, study these things in the complete detail that they need. So by me using these simplistic models, it allows me to easily get these ideas across in a simple way, which is all about what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to take these very, very difficult and esoteric concepts and put them into a way that is easily digestible and easily understood. Thank you for the donation, Javier. Okay, guys, and thank you for the donation, Rose. Oh, Rose says, I've always struggled with multiple personality, identical dissociative disorder, as well as PTSD, until I watched your videos, helped me be more creative. That's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. So happy to hear that. All right, guys, I want to jump into the 3 steps on how to actualize your higher self here. Oh, thank you for the donation, Dejaris. Dejaris is an awesome longtime supporter. Dejaris says, my daughter, little DJ, said, you have a beautiful mind, and Ad Astra. Well, that's wonderful. Tell her Ad Astra as well. That's fantastic. And for those of you who are on Facebook, join us on YouTube, okay? Let me see how many of you. There's 100 of you guys, 120 of you guys are on Facebook. Go over to YouTube, okay? If you support my work, show it by subscribing to my YouTube. That's where I'm interacting with people right now. So go, the link is in the description. Go click it, go there, and subscribe. And guys, let's get those likes up. We're at 120 likes, but we have 220 people watching. Hit that like button, smash it. Smash that like button until it actualizes itself. Let's see, can we get those likes over 200? That's our goal. We always do. Again, I don't know what it means. I don't know how it helps. But our goal for this live stream is over 200 likes. Oh wow, it just jumped up by 20. We're at 140 likes right now. Thank you for the donation, Raz. You are awesome. Raz says Mr. Morgue rocks Ad Astra. I agree. Mr. Morgue does rock. Oh, those likes are at 150. Let's get those even higher. And also, guys, remember that we are having a secret supporters live stream right after this because the comments gets crazy out here. If you want to be a part of our secret supporters only live stream, you can. Just become a supporter on Patreon and you'll be able to join us. We have weekly secret live streams every week because, you know, it just gets kind of crazy out here. There's trolls, the comments fly by really quick. And that is the best way to support. So the link to the Patreon, to my Patreon, is in the description of this video. That's the best way to support, and you're going to be able to join us in our secret live stream that's going to be happening after this one. So let's jump into the 3 steps to actualizing your higher self. So, okay, so we have understood that your higher self is the totality of all these things, and that you have these important unconscious structures. And what you want to do is to make these unconscious structures conscious and integrate them. Because to actualize your higher self, you must take what is unconscious and make it conscious. That is the goal. But how do we do this? So the 3 steps are know, discover, and integrate. Okay, once again, know, discover, and integrate. So what we want to do is make the unconscious conscious. And the first step is know. So first we just have to know that these unconscious structures exist. If you don't know that you have a shadow self, how can you possibly make it conscious? The idea is to make the unconscious conscious. And the very, 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 very first step, there's a lot of varies. You know it's important because of the amount of varies, is knowing that it exists. That's the first step of making the unconscious conscious. Right there, just knowing of its existence, you've made a little bit of your unconscious conscious, right? Because think about if your conscious awareness, right? Let's say you're in a super dark room, and that's your mind. You're in a pitch black room, and your ego, let's say, is like a flashlight, and the light from the flashlight is like your consciousness. So you're in this dark room, you got your ego flashlight, and so just a little portion of the room, a tiny portion of the room is lit up. So let's say you move the flashlight to a corner of the room that you never have before, and you see your shadow self. Now you know that you have a shadow self. You've made a little bit of the unconscious conscious by simply knowing of its existence. That's the first step. That's the first step. So to be able to, you should definitely watch my video series on inner star actualization. Inner star is another word that we use for the higher self. To be able to really know about all these structures so that you can start and begin to shine that flashlight around, right? So that's the first step, is know. The second step is discover. Now that you know that it exists, right? Now you have to discover what its properties are, what its traits are. So you've shined the flashlight, you went, oh wow, hey, there's my shadow self. I didn't know it existed. Now you have to discover its properties. So that would be like you going over and talking to your shadow self, getting to know it. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What are you? Tell me about yourself. You are now discovering the properties and traits of your shadow self. All right, so, and in terms of philosophy, we are going from universal to particular. Every human has a shadow self. It's a universal. But the traits of each person's shadow self is particular. It's going to be different for each person. My shadow self will be different from your shadow self versus someone else's shadow self. We all have a shadow self. It's universal, but its particularity, its traits will be different for each of us. So first step is to know of its existence. The second step is to discover its traits. So you have to imagine that you are like a detective trying to figure out what the traits are of your shadow self and this applies to all the different structures, right? These three steps applies to all of your structures: know, discover, and integrate. So discover. There's a lot of different ways how you can discover the traits, and it will be different for each structure. So for your shadow self, a great way to discover it is think about things that make you uncomfortable, because the shadow self is the parts of you that you denied and repressed and said, these are not a part of me. So very often it's the things that will make you uncomfortable that are parts of your shadow self. It doesn't mean everything that makes you uncomfortable is your shadow self, but start now that you know that it exists, you need to sort of turn your radar on and constantly be looking and trying to discover, oh, could this possibly be your shadow self? Look at things that annoy you in other people. Well, does it annoy you possibly because it's part of your shadow self? Like, look at that person and their crazy makeup looks. Look at them. They're so annoying. Why don't they tone it down? Well, is it possible that you secretly wish that you could do those crazy makeup looks? That's just one example. We could do whole videos on how to integrate. Again, this has to do with your mirror self and your power self as well. All these different structures will have different ways of discovering their traits and discovering their properties. And then I'm just going to go over this real quick, and then if we have time, we're going to go into each one in more detail. But then the third step is integrate. Okay, so third step is integrate. So we have discovered that it exists. We have we have gained knowledge that it exists. We have discovered its traits. The next step is to integrate those qualities into your consciousness in a healthy way. So, in our example of, let's say your shadow self does contain this desire to have wild makeup looks, that would mean that you would start giving yourself the opportunity to try it out, to experiment with these, makeup looks and things like this. If your shadow self contains anger and aggression, well, you would want to find healthy ways to incorporate that. Because if you just deny it, right, it's going to build and build and build and come out in unhealthy ways. So find ways to healthily let it out. Maybe, go to one of those rooms that let you destroy things to get your aggression out. Maybe direct your anger towards the current state of the world and using as fuel to make changes in the world. All right? These are some examples. So these are the different steps, the 3 steps that you need to take. You need to know of their existence. You need to discover their properties, and then you need to healthily integrate them into your life. And this applies to everything. With your mirror self, if your mirror self is extremely feminine, then you need to figure out ways to integrate femininity into your life. If your mirror self is if you're very artistic, then your mirror self is going to be very logical and rational. That means you need to take the steps to study some intellectual things in your life. Or if you're very intellectual, it means to start experimenting with art and creativity. Your power self will mean cultivating those parts of you that you admire in others and bringing them forth and actualizing them into your own life. So these are the 3 steps to actualizing your higher self. You got to know these structures exist. You have to discover their properties. Then you have to take the steps to healthily integrate them into your life. And I'm going to emphasize healthily integrate. You want to integrate them in a healthy way, because if your shadow self contains anger, doesn't mean you want to just be angry at everyone. That's shadow possession, not healthy integration. That's possession. So these are the 3 steps, and incredibly important to understanding how to actualize your higher self. Now, there's a lot more that I want to get into if we have the time. We do have more time here, and so I want to get into more of this discussion because there's more that I can say about this. And let me jump into the comments here and the questions. Wow, there are a lot of comments. Once again, guys, for those of you who do donate, I will do my best to answer your question. But let me try and go through, see if, wow, these comments are going by very, very quickly. Oh yeah, hey you guys, let's get to 200 likes. We're at 191 likes right now. Come on, come on. We are 9 likes away from passing 200. Hit that like button. Smash it into submission. Hey, does your shadow self contain anger? Healthily integrate it by taking it out on that like button. Come on, let's get over 200. I don't know why, but that's what we're doing. We want to get... Oh yeah, we did it. We are at 201. Let's go even higher. Why not? Let's keep going. Let's see how high we can get that going. For those of you guys who are on Facebook, I am interacting with people on YouTube. So make sure you go over to YouTube and subscribe. All you guys who are watching who aren't subscribed, please subscribe. So, for those of you guys who can't donate on Patreon, for those of you guys, who can't donate in general, the best way you can support is by subscribing and turning on the bell to turn on all notifications. So if you're watching right now and you aren't subscribed, please subscribe. If you're watching right now and you are subscribed, but you haven't hit the bell to turn on all notifications, please hit that bell. I can't tell you how much it helps. My content is controversial, so it's so hard to constantly be fighting the social media algorithms. And when you hit that bell, that helps immensely. So go do that. Do that right now. All right, let me jump into some of these comments here. Oh yeah, we're at 223 likes and it's going up. Let's get that up even higher. Someone wants to know if, we're atheist and don't believe in God. That's not really on topic, but let me just answer this question. We're not atheist. I'm not atheist. Why? Because I know that I am God. That we are God. From the absolute perspective, we are God. So, how can you be atheist if you know that God is what we are? I am God. You are God. We are God. We are all gods and goddesses in the making. We are the universe coming to self-knowledge. Now, we absolutely reject faith. All right, we are not based on faith. We are based on logic, reason, and mathematics. So we come to this understanding through logic, reason, and mathematics. We understand that this is a mental reality, a shared dream, and that we are all eternal minds. Speaking of this, let me tell you how this relates a little bit to actualizing your higher self. Because you might be wondering, well, is actualizing your higher self the end of the road? Once you actualize your higher self completely, have you finished? No. Actualizing your higher self is all about you as an individual. But you can go beyond and higher than higher self actualization, inner star actualization. And what comes after this is becoming a living archetype and then actualizing your absolute self. Now, I'm going to have to get into this in another video because this is, beyond actualizing your higher self. It's becoming a living archetype and then actualizing your absolute self. And this is when it turns to really shaping reality, really shaping existence, becoming a conscious world shaper. And this is so important. And I eventually want to get everyone up to this level so that we can become a powerful community of living archetypes intent on shaping the trajectory of first this world and then the universe. I always want you to think beyond the limited viewpoint of a tiny fractured human understanding. Not only is this just about this lifetime and this world, but in the grand scheme of things, this is beyond this lifetime and beyond this world. It's about uniting and optimizing and evolving the universe itself. We have big plans, we have big goals, my friends, and this is why it can be very, very frustrating incarnating on Earth at this time, because everyone is so very basic in their level of evolution that they don't even realize that what we can do when we come together, the worlds that we can create, the realities that we can create, the things that we can manifest when we all become living archetypes and work on actualizing the absolute. And this is why we're building the Hyperion community. So those of us with knowledge and understanding of this can come together and actualize our potential as living archetypes and world shapers. Let me jump into the comments here. All right, just reading them. There are a lot of them. Guys, remember that I will be going live. We're going to have a secret supporters only live stream today very soon. So if you want to be a part of that, you can. Just become a supporter on Patreon. The link is in the description of this video. Best way to support my work is through becoming a supporter on Patreon or donating right now through here. And if you can't donate, please subscribe. That's a great way to support. I'm looking at you guys over on Facebook. Get your asses over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button. Anyway, best way to support is subscribe, hit the bell to turn on all notifications, and share my videos everywhere. Big shout out to everyone who does that. All you guys who even just show up, you are all awesome. Snowy says, this is awesome. The first live stream I've seen in months. I'm stoked. I'm glad you can join us. Remember, we do this every week, every Thursday, so I hope you can make it to the next one. So we have enough time that I want to discuss why. Oh, thank you so much for the donation, Alex. You're awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you. That helps so much, guys. Why the power self is the most dangerous to integrate. So before you integrate your power self, you want to at least have integrated your shadow self and your mirror self a bit. Because your power self can, people like Donald Trump and Hitler are people who were extremely in touch with their power self, but did not integrate their mirror self or their shadow self. If you don't integrate your mirror self or your shadow self, you become sort of like Sauron instead of Gandalf. You become obsessed with power. And you sort of give off this very powerful personality where other people will sort of flock to you. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's a good step to becoming a living archetype, being able to influence others. But you want to influence them in a positive way. And so if you are sort of possessed by your power self and haven't done any mirror work or shadow work, you're going to gain immense amounts of power. You're going to gain immense amounts of support. But guess what? That unintegrated shadow and mirror is going to rear its ugly head, and that can take many forms, such as hating the other, hating women if you're a man, hating LGBTQ. It can improperly managing your anger, being either consumed with certain parts of your personality rather than others. So your power self is very powerful. It's like fire. It's strength and resonance. But this is why it's so important to have integrated your mirror and your shadow at least a bit before really tapping into your power self, because again, this is where again, leaders in the world are those who have tapped into their power self. And we need leaders who have a great power self, but have also done their mirror work and their shadow work. If you haven't done your mirror work and your shadow work, but you integrate your power, this is where you get dictators and even things like toxic celebrity culture and things like this. So this is why the power self is the most powerful archetype to integrate, besides your higher self, of course, but it's the most dangerous. Green Moon says, I'm amazed how he involved Lord of the Rings in this. Lord of the Rings has so many powerful archetypes. You can learn a lot if you study the symbolism behind Lord of the Rings. It's a very intelligent, don't get possessed by the ring of power. There's nothing wrong with having power as long as you have done your shadow work and your mirror work as well, and you are working towards positivity, whether and compassion, and building a better world and helping others actualize instead of being obsessed with just personal aggrandizement and things like this. Oh, so Horkpaw donated, thank you so much, and said, someone asked before you started why you hurt yourself during stunts and wanted to try the same thing. Can you briefly explain the dangers? So I think what in general this person is asking, for those who don't know, I am an extreme stunt artist as well. I do things like sword swallowing and a lot of very dangerous work. And I think they're asking me, why do I do this? My life has always been about pushing myself, going beyond and going further. So it's all about pushing myself and exploring and surpassing all limitations, body and mind. So being able to, everything is very symbolic for me. I have pushed the mind very, very far to see and understand aspects of reality. And I have also pushed the body very, very far in doing these stunts like sword swallowing and whatnot. And when I do these stunts, I can sort of show you that in a symbolic way that I am about going beyond limitations, going beyond human, surpassing all boundaries. So for me, these stunts are symbolic, right? I can perform them and show you and say, look, symbolically, it's about going beyond, surpassing boundaries, always pushing yourself, always going forward. Because I can't let you guys look into my mind, literally, and show you the things I see. I can do my best by creating these videos and creating graphics and communicating. But also, these stunts are a symbolic way for me to show that and express that as well. So once again, do not, I don't recommend that you do this. I am a trained professional. Do not try any of the things that I try at home. They are very, very dangerous. But hopefully that answers your questions. Chanel says, take down those barriers and allow yourself to push through for a better self. Absolutely, 100%. Okay, guys, we are going to be having a supporters only secret live stream. If you want to be a part of that, you can become a supporter. The link is in the description of this video. We are going to have a supporters live stream in just a few minutes. So support there and help us move forward. Now, guys, I want to tell you that once again, actualizing your higher self is incredibly important. And every week we talk about very, very crucial topics. So make sure that you join us every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Make sure that you are here. Smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, and turn on the bell for all notifications. Once again, do that right now, guys. Hit that like button, make it go up. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. And I can't tell you how important this is. If you haven't turned on the alerts, hit the bell to turn on those alerts. Very difficult putting the information I do out there because I'm constantly fighting the algorithms. Help me out. Help us get this message out there by turning those alerts on right now. Okay, so guys, actualizing your higher self is so important. So make sure that you exercise these 3 steps. First, know, discover, and integrate. Know all these structures. Know them. Know about them. Right? You have to know they exist. You can do that by checking out my Inner Star Actualization video series. Also, make sure that you do the second step, which is discover their properties, discover their traits. Figure out what your shadow self is, what your mirror self is, what your power self is, those individual traits that are particular and individual to you and you alone. And then healthily integrate those into your consciousness. This is how you will make the unconscious conscious. By following these 3 steps of knowing, discovering, and integrating, you will make the unconscious conscious, and begin to actualize the true you, who you truly are, your inner star. So always so good to see you here, guys. I will see you next week, and for supporters, I'll see you in the secret stream. My name is Morgue, and I am Hyperion. Ad Astra, to the stars.